What a joy to be here, and what a beautiful day the Lord has given us, that is for sure. I'm really thankful for that. Confederate Memorial Day, think about that. A memorial is that which stirs the mind, lifts the affections, and excites the will to action. So every time we have a Confederate Memorial Day, you have to ask this question: what action should be taken? Are my affections stirred? And what must I really truly do? Well, as the truth is put forth, we must embrace it, and we must apply it as well. Our problem in the South is this, basically, that as Southerners, we have basically forgotten the truths, the principles, the precepts from which our Confederate ancestors fought and died. We forgot the cause. The cause was not slavery. Everyone knows that. Of course, the 4th Amendment proves that very clearly. But it was Lincoln himself who proved that it was not slavery. For Lincoln said, I have no purpose directly or indirectly to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. Later on he said, I say we must not interfere with the institution of slavery because the Constitution forbids it and the general welfare does not require it. And finally, he said this: we didn't go into the war to put down slavery, but to put the flag back and to act differently at this moment when I have no doubt not only weaken our cause, but smack of lack of faith. So the war was certainly not over slavery. It was not fought either to retain the slaves or to free the slaves. The North was basically fighting for dominion, for control, and for money. And the South was basically fighting for liberty and freedom and that which was right and holy. Yes. And the war was fought also under what you and I would call Christian principles and presuppositions. And we're in grave danger today, I believe, in losing every vestige of liberty that we have simply because we have really forgotten the cause for which our forefathers fought. It was Jefferson Davis who said it like this, quoted earlier by Mr. Kennedy. He said, although the Confederacy as an organization may have ceased to exist, listen carefully, the fundamental principles, the eternal truths uttered when our colonies in 1776 declared their independence, on which the Confederation of 1781 and the Union of 1788 were formed, and which animated and guided the Confederacy of 1861, yet live, and God, in God's appointed time, will indeed prevail. And that is true. It will prevail. Truth shall stand. It was John Broadus. John Broadus was not only a Virginian, but a Confederate evangelist. He was a famous Baptist preacher, and he said this: no, the dead have not lived or died in vain. If the survivors know aught of right thoughts and right feelings. So we need to make sure that we have our thinking straight. We need to make sure that we have our feelings straight. That is for sure. All you have to do today is look around and see what is being taught in our school system. You can also look around and see what is not being taught in our school system. There is so much ignorance on history, Southern history, and so much ignorance even among Southern people who've been indoctrinated by Northern literature, who do not understand the principles for which we fought. Have you ever stopped to think about this? Have you ever stopped to think about all of the venom, all of the hatred that is being spewed forth against our monuments, against our statues, against anything that symbolizes the South and the Confederacy? Do you ever wonder why? Let me tell you why. If this monument is allowed to stand to Jefferson Davis, to Stonewall Jackson, to Robert E. Lee, if others are allowed to stand, and we see the memorials all across the land, all of a sudden, somebody might say, what in the world are the meanings of all these memorials? What are they memorializing? How far have we fallen? How far have we left the principles upon which our nation was founded? Let me tell you something. There is a purpose and a deliberate purpose in trying to mutilate and trying to destroy and remove every memorial and every statue that relates to the South and Southern independence. Do you have to understand this? And you must, in order to maintain a tyrannical control, the Southern culture, the Southern history, and Southern truth must be destroyed. And that that's exactly what they're trying to do. Eliminate our heritage, eliminate and rewrite our history. Now, instead of me talking about just individual soldiers today, I want to just really dwell upon the cause of the war. I want you to think about at least three principles today. The war, first of all, was a defensive war. It was self-defense. Plain and simple. May I remind you, the South did not invade the North. The North invaded the South. When Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers for 3 months to bring the seceded Cotton States back into the Union, that was the war right there. May I tell you that a union held together by force is not a union. A union held together by bayonets is not a union. You can take two tomcats, tie their tails together, throw them over a clothesline. You have union, but you certainly do not have unity. I can assure you of that. Lincoln invaded the states. Listen, if you don't think the war was a defensive war, listen to this quote by Congressman, radical Republican Congressman Thaddeus Stevens. Here's what he said. The talk of restoring the Union as it was and under the Constitution as it is one of the absurdities which I have heard repeated until I have become sick of it. There are many things which make such an event impossible. This Union never shall, with my consent, be restored under the Constitution as it is. The Union as it was, and the Constitution as it is, God forbid it. We must conquer the southern states and hold them as conquered provinces. That was the attitude of the North. It was Colonel Richard Henry Lee who said we were not rebels. We did not fight to perpetuate human slavery, but for our rights and our privileges under a government established over us by our fathers and in defense of our homes. You know, it's interesting that oftentimes Confederate soldiers were captured, and while they were being interrogated, while they were being questioned, one of the questions that was most frequently asked is, why are you fighting? And the standard answer was this: because you're here. Because you're here. If you had not come here, we would not be fighting, that is for sure. The truth of the matter is this: the South had to be conquered for the North to win the war. Since most of the fighting was done on Southern soil, it should be obvious that the North was the aggressor. It is the aggressor who causes a need for a defense. If there was no aggression, there would be no need for a defense. It was General Beauregard who said it very plainly. He said the fact that one army was fighting for union and the other army was fighting for disunion is a political expression. The actual fact on the battlefield, in the face of cannon and musket, was that the Federal troops came as an invader and the Southern troops stood as defenders of their homes, and further than that, there is no need to go. And that is true. That is absolutely true. I love this quote by Reverend Thomas Jefferson Martin. 50 years after the war for Southern independence, he said this: they invaded our lands, they burned our homes, they stole our property, they murdered members of our families, they kept their heels on the back of our necks with unjust law.